Hello and welcome to the Creatives Couch with me, Gemma Naylor. Today's guest is an accomplished actor and musician. He's a highly sought after voice and acting coach. It is the marvellous Reece Richardson. Reece, thank you for joining me on the Creatives Couch.
It's my pleasure.
So you sit on some of the audition panels with some of the most prestigious drama schools in the country. What would you say is the first thing you notice about an actor when they walk into the room?
It's a great question. I think for me, it's are they breathing? It's a really simple thing. And that kind of informs, are they relaxed? Are they in the space? Because it's quite a simple thing to notice once you kind of see the signs. Are they connected with the breath? Are they present? Are they sort of very nervous? How are they feeling? I think a lot of the things that people instinctively notice when anyone walks into the room, because it's a human being who's walking into the space, despite the sort of, very heightened environment being an audition panel and there's nerves and things like that. But I think if they're breathing and available and working with the nerves, to me that's very exciting when I see that. Because it kind of means that despite everything else that's going on, we're going to get something truthful, they're going to explore the work, and that's where the focus is. So that's, I think, what I notice immediately.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. Like, what are the clues to you, sort of as an expert in this field, that somebody isn't utilising their breath or they are disconnected from it and unaware sort of how it's impacting them?
One of the key things is relaxation. Is an element of relaxation within that. So if somebody is sort of breathing, if they're quite tense, it can restrict the breath dropping deeper into the body and connecting to a kind of more truthful place, a more open place. So if somebody's quite tense, or if the breath's sort of held high in the body, so you can sort of see the chest maybe moving a bit more, and the ribs maybe aren't sort of swinging open and shut, subtle things. It suggests to me, and this is not the case in every single case, there's never anything that's sort of blanket, that they're potentially not accessing the full capacity of their sort of respiratory system. And so they might not be able to access all of the choices that are available to them. So I think those sort of slight physical signs, as well as a kind of a psychological suggestion of, okay, this person might be a bit tense. How do we relax them? How do we get them so that they're not restricting themselves within their work?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I guess if someone's feeling sort of in that fight or flight mode and they're in that survival headspace, they're not going to give a beautifully relaxed performance full of choices, like you say, because they're just like, get to the end, survive, get through it.
Yeah, completely. And I think you've heard something really interesting there for me, which is that fight or flight. And when you're in that mode, the body instinctively is kind of tensing up. It's wanting to explosively respond to a perceived threat, whether that's sort of psychological, whether it's physical. And it just means that, those choices are potentially not going to be quite as dynamic as they could be. And so when it's in that environment of an audition, I go, how do we help you to relax into that? How do we help you just go, okay, I accept what's going on, I know where I am, I'm safe here, let's do the work.
So what would you, because you've done a lot of work with sort of public speakers and actors with audition technique, do you find that there's one thing in particular that, people about to give a performance are afraid of that triggers that sort of the nervousness or the fight or flight response? Or is it very different in each individual?
It can be very different in each individual, I think. There's no one size fits all, which is something that I love about working with the voice. It's really tailored to each individual person. However, there are things that are common factors. The nervousness is the first thing. So wanting to do the perfect performance or the perfect speech, the intention is wonderful, but it can put you into a space where you're going, what happens if it goes wrong? Or I'm not, I'm forecasting in my head that all of the things that I want to avoid are all the things that are potentially problems. And I think what that does is that then stops you from being here and now in the moment, in the present moment. And a bit like the sort of fight or flight response, if you're constantly on the lookout for threats, you're going, where is the danger here? What should I avoid? What should I do? Where do I need to be? Rather than going, I accept where I am. I'm here in this moment, and this is actually what's happening. Not sort of forecasting or looking backwards. I'm just here right now. And I think when somebody just allows the breath to sort of drop in, it just allows those moments where you're in the future or in the past to go, okay, I understand, I accept that. I accept this is a nervous situation. But what's in front of me actually is another person who I'm talking to. And
I'm safe.
Yeah, I'm safe, exactly. Because at this exact moment, you are safe. Because the things that you're potentially afraid of happening are not happening. And I think that it sounds really basic and really silly, but I think there's great power in that, because you're able to reset for a brief split second, a moment, to just go, oh yeah, actually I'm all right. Okay, great. There's this moment, then the next moment also might be all right, and then the one after that, and after that, and after that.
Yeah.
And that becomes quite exciting, because then you're in the moment.
Yeah.
And for me, it's kind of as simple as that, I think.
Gosh, I think it's really exciting, sort of the techniques and viewpoints you're bringing to the creative industries at the moment. I feel they're things that have been explored in sort of professional sport for quite a while. So that moment of being really present and not just focusing on the job in front of them. I feel like as creators, we don't really engage with that. We just expect people to be able to perform under pressure without any kind of real psychological training. What drew you to be so fascinated towards, the breath and its power?
A couple of things. I think when I was younger, I did a lot of swimming, and I think that involves breath control, because there are moments where you're underwater, so you can't, you literally can't breathe. So I think,
you learned quickly that you had to when you could.
Exactly, and I think that's sort of first instinctively from a sort of sports perspective. It started that journey, and then I was very fortunate when I went to drama school to have that world sort of opened up for me by the tutors there, and I think that sort of ignited this real love and passion of actually what the potential of the breath can be, and sort of from Central then, and then over the last kind of 10 years of working in the industry, I've been very, very lucky to meet some phenomenal people that are far more skilled than I am, that are, including the tutors at Central, who are real sort of world leaders. And I think what that does is you're constantly exposed to different ideas, and you can go, okay, how do I fit into this? What do I find exciting? I was very fortunate to work in the US and worked with a company called Aquila Theatre, and they have something called the Warrior Chorus, which is where they take and work with US veterans within classical theatre, so particularly like Greek tragedy.
Amazing.
And things like that. Yeah, it's a phenomenal company. And we were touring around the United States. We're sort of based in New York, and then you go around the whole of the US, and you go to lots of different places that are not necessarily on the beaten track. And I was leading workshops and working with people over there, and I think that was really fascinating, because you're working with people who are from a very different life, they've got a very different life experience to myself, and coming from a creative background. And the power of breath sort of particularly for the veterans was very interesting. What that means to somebody who's breathing in the US. There's some really exciting work that has been done with sort of the Navy SEALs on that sort of kind of tunnel breathing, the Wim Hof work, and that's fascinating to me. I think the appreciation for how powerful that really simple biological process actually is something that's gaining traction in the West now, but has been known across the world in other cultures for thousands of years.
Yeah,
so
we're a bit behind, aren't we? Just a little.
Yeah, exactly. But I think what's joyous about that is it's coming at it going, this is not new stuff. This is things that people have been doing for thousands of years. But how do we fit in that within a very stressful modern world, within the creative industries particularly? How do we utilize the knowledge that's come before and implement it in a practical way? And I think that for me has been very exciting as an actor, and then working with other people who sort of come to me and want to explore the voice and want to explore the breath work. I kind of go, great, let's have a look at the basics. And then there's all of these amazing practitioners that you can look at that are, you know, really developed in the field. But how do we practically get you to kind of where you're interested in exploring at this point? Are you kind of getting out of your own way a little bit?
Yeah.
To then be able to tell the stories, speak the speeches, communicate in the way that you want to. So there's no one size fits all, and I'm quite passionate about that because I don't like that being like there's a right or wrong way to speak or breathe. You speak how you speak.
So is it helping people get back to kind of their purest form? Would you say that's part of the, like, how would you describe it?
It's a nice way of putting it. I think it's just, I think it's allowing somebody to speak authentically.
Yeah.
To breathe authentically and to connect with something very simple and just have an appreciation of something very basic. And I really like that because I think you can get wrapped up in kind of things that are complicated, they are mysterious or mysticky, and I feel like that sets up a bit of a hierarchy that can be very exclusive for people. And you know, the body wants to breathe. You look at a baby.
Yeah.
A child is phenomenal. Little babies, they can scream and they can scream and scream and scream and scream, and they never lose their voice.
No vocal fatigue.
No vocal fatigue. They keep going and they can just go for hours and hours and hours, and it's desperately, you know, frustrating for a parent potentially. But when you're looking at the biomechanics of that, and I'm not a scientist or a doctor, but when you're looking at that, how does that sort of infant not lose its voice when it's using such a vocal extremity? Because there's not really any sort of emotional tension, there's not really any extra tension. They're just thinking, feeling, breathing, speaking all at the same time, without any tension
Instinct.
on top of it.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so that's, for me, how do you, as a performer, tap into that a little bit?
Yeah.
Which is almost reverting back to the childlike state where you're able to just, from a relaxed place,
be present,
be truthful, and then you're less likely to do damage because there's not extra things going on that are potentially getting in the way of
So
that.
is that, because you've worked with a lot of people who've had sort of vocal issues, concerns, nodules, fatigue, do you think their use of the breath can contribute to those issues, or would you say it's quite a separate issue?
I think it's all linked. I think certainly when I work with people who are experiencing vocal challenges or vocal issues, because I'm not a healthcare practitioner, for me it's very, very early stages. And there's a few sort of common warning signs within those things, particularly pain. If there's any pain within your vocal tract, it's, pain is usually a good sign. It should be a time to pop to the doctor and
yes, don't ignore it.
Don't ignore it.
That's been sore for months,
Exactly. It's like, that's kind of probably your body telling you that something is potentially being damaged here. The discomfort, I remember a respiratory physio told me a long time ago, they said discomfort is good when you're rehabilitating yourself, but pain is the body's way of saying, careful, some damage is being done somewhere. So I always took that as a good marker for myself, particularly when I was doing roles or parts that are particularly extreme, kind of a lot of screaming, shouting, crying. That's what I would classify as like a vocal extreme. Where there's a risk of damage. And if you are doing those parts, you should be warming up a lot.
Not just jumping in, hydrating.
I mean, some people can do that, which is amazing, and again, sort of, for me, I find vocal warm-ups very, very useful. And I think the more that you do them, the more it becomes just second nature and the quicker you can tap into it. So it's that sort of discipline equaling freedom, that kind of thing, I think, back to your original question, I diverted away from it. It is, yes, I think it's very linked. Because if there's damage or if there's pain, you're potentially going to tense up, and then it kind of becomes a sort of vicious cycle. Vocal nodules and things like that have got a real fear and a stigma against them. If there is any sort of concern within the work of the performer, or if there is any suggestion that potentially those things are happening, for me it's pop to your GP and see if you can get seen by an ENT, ear, nose and throat specialist, and get them to sort of have a look. They may need to kind of put cameras and things to look at. But I think you can help it. You can help alleviate the symptoms by relaxing, by finding a place where you can work that is, free of tension.
Because someone told me years and years ago, and it really stuck with me, that and it was an Indian meditation kind of guru, really, when I was doing some studying over there, and they said that the breath was the gateway between the mind and body.
Well,
so when someone's experienced anxiety, you can calm that and release tension from just connecting with your breath. Are you in agreement with that? Or you'd say that that's pretty accurate?
I think that's lovely. I think when we think of voice and body, we tend to think of them as two separate things. Or it's something that I've noticed from going into work with some of the casts that I've worked in, or myself as well. You sometimes think
separate them. You're like, it's one thing.
Yeah, it's
one machine.
I think that was one of the things that I was fortunate within the training that I did, 10, 11 years ago now, was that it broke down that barrier for me in my head, where when actually everything's linked. And so if you do one thing to one part of your body, it's going to have an impact elsewhere as well. And that is really exciting, because I think you're able to then, if you're able to work on one aspect of it, like, as you said, the gateway is a beautiful analogy. You're opening those gates to start finding a freedom and a connection with the body and the breath. So you're doing a lot of things all at the same time by focusing on one or two aspects, which I think is exciting, between the mind and the body, thinking of it as one thing.
Yep.
And interconnected deeply. It is far more powerful. I mean, you stop, the average person, if they go without breath for 3 minutes, that's it.
It's not long, is it?
That's a very short space of time.
Yeah.
And when you think of it within the body, if the body isn't breathing, the mind isn't able to function, the body's not able to function.
Yeah.
So I think that's spot on, personally.
What would be your most simple breath exercise to give to somebody who's sort of listening now and going, you know what, I'm interested in this, but I'm quite anxious. I find it really hard to sit still. I'm not going to have the focus to do breath work, because it doesn't sound very exciting, does it? I'll sit there breathing like I do all the time, and now I'm going to do exercises on it.
Yeah.
So where would you start with, like, a complete beginner? What would be your sort of introduction to it?
You hit something spot on for me, which is the fact that we do it all the time. Yeah, it's absolutely. And why sit here and talk about something that we do for the entire, as a basic thing? It's like talking about how your heart's beating, right? I'm just doing it every time. It's like, yes, you are. That is completely correct. But bringing an awareness to that basic function is powerful. One of the wonderful things of calming nerves, certainly in my own experience, is, if you allow yourself to just question, am I breathing? Especially if you're in the middle of really feeling very nervous or very anxious, just that simple question, it resets a lot of what's going on and can actually divert the mind from sort of going off on a path to just going, am I breathing? Oh yeah, I am breathing. Oh, I'm alive. And then it starts that process we were talking about earlier, I'm safe, I'm okay, instinctively. So for me, that would be where I would start, even before we start breathing.
So mental training first.
Yeah, I think so. It's, again, it's just my opinion with it, but I find that's the most effective for me and for the clients I work with and for the people I work with. That gentle question before you start any of the work, just am I breathing? Yeah, and by bringing the awareness to the breath, it just grounds you in the moment for free, instantly. There's a lot of talk about sort of panic attacks and that kind of work and how, like, for example, there was the old thing on planes where you'd have like a paper bag, right, and you get someone to breathe into the paper bag and kind of. So for me, it's interesting because it's kind of the breath doing a lot of the heavy lifting there, where it's sort of slowing down that process and just going, am I breathing? Yeah, cool. Okay, that basic biological function is happening. Okay, I can now reset and work on the rest of the things. In terms of practical breath work, for a complete beginner, simply taking your hand and placing it just below the belly button.
Yeah, I'm going to do it with you now.
It's really simple, yeah. And I think just all that does is it. When you place your hand below your belly button, and you just enjoy the sensation of the hand rising and falling away from the body and then back into the body. So away from the body on the in-breath and then back towards the body on the out-breath. You are actively taking your breath from a sort of high place in the body to somewhere a little bit lower, which is accessing the lower parts of your lungs. And so you're accessing that full breath capacity. And then that's slowing down your breath. And when you think about that fight or flight that we were talking about earlier, a lot of times you're going to breathe in oxygen very quickly, quite shallow breaths, quick breaths, because you need to potentially go into action.
Yeah.
But if you're able to slow the breath down, it's telling the body, I'm actually in a relaxed state. So you're kind of actively engaging with an unconscious process.
Yeah.
You're making the unconscious conscious. Really exciting. And it's everyone can do it. Everyone can do it. It's for free. And that simple process, I think then, I mean, because, you know, we can wax lyrical about some of the more kind of in-depth breath techniques, the kind of complex stuff that's exciting, that is absolutely part of it. But for me, starting there, slowing the breath down, getting it dropping deeper into the body is where actually I found a lot of the exciting work happens. Yeah. That's a long answer to your question. I apologise.
No, it's brilliant. How much do you think our control of our breath affects the pitch and tone of our voice?
That's a good question. I think it has an influence on it. Because it's part of the process. It's the thing that starts everything else going. Right?
Yeah.
You know, before the word, there's the breath.
Yeah.
There's the biomechanical process of breathing in and then breathing out, when then making sound from there. So I think it definitely has an impact in terms of how the sound is formed. That differs from person to person. In my sort of limited experience with that, it's not something that I've noticed, okay, if you breathe like this, it's going to definitively make this sound, because everyone's voices is unique and everything that comes to that.
So would you say it's more, maybe, I'm just conscious when I get voice, I'm a big fan of voice notes, as you know.
Yeah, no, they're great.
But you can hear when somebody is stressed, often their tone is a bit higher and they speak a lot faster. And I'm just thinking in terms of like what you say when you bring your breath very much to your acting work and your coaching work, how much that impacts sort of, the vocal performance that we're giving in terms of the emotion that's expressed, how much of that choice, if we're not aware of our breath, is conscious.
I think that for me is where it becomes exciting. When you're making something that is unconscious conscious, you have more of a control, not necessarily the right word, you have more influence over it and you can work with it. And then with the more sort of relaxed you are, the more present you are with that process, the more authentic the voice is going to be. It's going to be therefore more true, which I think is exciting as an actor, because like when I'm working as a performer, what I want is how can I be truthful in this? How can I serve the story and be in communication with the other person and the audience, the listeners or the people watching. And when you're more relaxed, you're going to be more authentic, I think, because you're not necessarily getting in your own way. And that's what excites me, because it's like if I can help anybody within that process, even if it's just going, oh yeah, I feel a bit more relaxed here. I'm like, great, that's going to be beneficial for you, because you're not going to be as stressed. You're not going to, your blood pressure is going to go down. You're going to be able to focus more on what's actually important in the moment. The other person is the most important thing. Like it becomes less about you and more about what you're sharing, and you become freer and less stuck. Yeah. And I find that's more conducive to the creative process, is being flexible, is being changeable. And it's very interesting watching two people with very different opinions clash, because often it gets very tight and constrained, and the voices shut down, and then the breath shuts down, and then we stop sort of sharing with each other. And I think in the world at the moment, there's a lot of very strong opinions on all sides, and like it's good to have a bit of flexibility within that, a bit of nuance and ability to listen, be heard and hear. And I think sharing the breath with somebody else is the basic of that. For me, just the basics I find super exciting. I think it allows us to be, again, present in the moment and genuinely listen to what the other person is saying, and not just kind of go like, you know, you've been part of those conversations before where you can tell the other person isn't really listening.
They're preparing their reply and you're like, I haven't finished speaking yet.
Exactly. So it becomes less of a communion and more of two two opinions clashing.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're present within the breath and that moment, that basic is there, and I think the other person goes, oh yeah, actually this person is quite relaxed, they're present with me, I feel like I can also be authentic. So that then starts a whole cycle of very exciting things where your listeners, your audience are starting to relax and they're really seeing the story that's being told. And that's what's exciting, because it becomes not about you or what's going on, it becomes about the story or the speech or the message that you're trying to share.
Yeah, because I think you said something very interesting early on about when, a potential, an actor comes into the room to audition, how you pick up on their nervousness. So if you're doing that as part of an audition panel, an audience are going to be doing that surely when performers are on the stage. And I think that's something that we often overlook when we are in a, we don't really always consider that, do we?
No, and I think, again, that all of the scenarios are going to be nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
Any situation where you are talking to other people, there's an element of nerves when you meet people for the first time, when you're going up on stage to speak in front of 1,000 people or 10 people, or if you're leading a class, or if you're going to, if you're doing, I don't know, if you're doing, Lady Macbeth, or if you're doing like filming or anything, there is an element of performative nerves within that. But I think for me, it's about accepting that.
Yeah.
And I think the breath has helped me personally to accept some very challenging moments in my personal life and also in professional. And you go, okay, I accept, I kind of can't change the fact that this is nervous, but I embrace that. That then loses its power, and it becomes not the most important thing in what's happening. It becomes more about, who am I speaking to? Why am I speaking to them? What do I want to share with them and listen? Yeah. It becomes quite exciting then.
100%. How would you help someone overcome, I'm trying to think of the best way to describe this. So I know you're not specifically a singing coach, but obviously you do a lot of work with the voice. So someone who's coming back from sort of a vocal injury or something that has been traumatic, where they feel they've been exposed on a stage or in performance, and they're trying to mentally overcome that, but obviously they don't feel safe in that space anymore. So it's not as simple of them to just go, I am safe here, because they're replaying what's gone previously. Where would you start helping, someone who's been through that kind of trauma to get over it and to start feeling safe back in that performance space?
It's a great question. Gently, with time, yeah, and trying to be as kind to yourself as possible. I think we live in a very immediate world where things are available very, very quickly. And there is an expectation that if I do sort of one or two exercises, it's going to be there. Myself and the people that I train with, we trained for 3 years, and a lot of that time was spent kind of on the basics, which was a real privilege to have that time to do that. Not everyone has that, opportunity or facility. And I think ever since then, all the stuff has been about, that I do, is about just time and learning and figuring that. With trauma, I mean, I'm not a psychologist or a therapist, but I think those are great tools to have in conjunction with breath work. So I think seeking mental health help, if it's possible, is fantastic, and is really beneficial for helping with that process, because sometimes it can be very difficult to re-engage, particularly with something that's been traumatic. It can be very difficult. So having an external professional help I'd always advocate that. And in terms of re-engaging with the professional space, which I think is what you were asking about, specifically, going back to the basics. If you feel like you're overcomplicating it, and I do that all the time because my brain works a million miles an hour, and I'm like, blah, 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 blah. But every time I do that, I go, just check back in with the basics again. Where's the breath sitting at today? Even before that, am I breathing? Where is the breath? Is it up here? Is it down here? Is it accessible to me? What am I working with vocally? Is there any injuries? What's changed? What do I need to work on for this specific character in this moment, in this work? I think as long as you are serving the work, and the work is the most important thing, that's great. But with anything that is I suppose, trauma-related mental health, I think seeking external help is really
Yeah.
important, and particularly with things, through Equity and BAPAM, which they're great as well. There is sort of support out there for professionals.
Because some people develop, I've seen it in a few friends of mine who are phenomenally talented, and through no fault of their own, either illness or injury, their voice is flipped in front of thousands of people or broken, and then they suddenly have this, develop real stage fright when they've never experienced it before. And then it's obviously quite a big hurdle to overcome. And I think people feel pressure to jump back into that big arena. But would your advice be to sort of start small? Start singing around the house, get really confident there, then?
I think so, but each time we sort of reintroduce that, and I speak from my own personal experience, each time you reintroduce gently, this is okay. Oh, maybe tomorrow I can do this. Maybe tomorrow I can do that. A little bit like, we're talking about with the respiratory physio.
Yeah.
If you jump straight in at the top end, at the real extreme, you're potentially going to cause pain, and then the body's going to respond to that and go, protect.
Shut down.
Exactly. Yeah. Stop. Don't want to do it. Exactly. Whereas if we can push it ever so gently, so it's kind of going into the maybe like mild discomfort. Again, I'm speaking super generally because it should be done really with medical professionals, particularly if it's like vocal nodule recovery or surgery or things like that. That should be done in conjunction with those professionals. But if you do it gently over time, I have seen it for me where I've gone the places that I thought I would never get to because of gently re-engaged with that simple basic process. Actually, day by day, it gets a bit better. Being kind and patient to yourself. And that's hard in a hyper-competitive industry.
Yeah.
And I think it's getting better. I do think it's getting better. There's more of an acceptance and an awareness that professional performers may need that support.
That we're not machines.
Yeah. And I think that to me is really valuable because the less we're treated like a machine and more like what we are, which is a living, breathing human being, the better and more consistent the work can be. And I think actually the deeper you can go with the work, the more you can explore the truth of things because it's safe.
Yeah.
If it's safe, you can really tell some quite extraordinary stories. And I think within breathwork, within breath technique, within acting technique, that's the most important thing. Telling the story truthfully and safely.
Yeah. So you have this incredibly calming aura around you, Reece.
Oh, thanks.
Now, do you do exercises on a daily basis to maintain that, or would you say that's just your natural? You just wake up with this very calming demeanour.
I wish I woke up every day and was like that. I think that I have encountered things that have been, as we all do, that are difficult and challenging, and the sort of calmness is definitely, as the people who know me will know, sometimes it's not always the case, but I think I've been very privileged within the work that I do and the people that I've met, the people that I've studied under, the people that I have taken as clients, the people that I've worked with in shows, to be around some phenomenal people who have allowed me to explore that sort of calm, I suppose, and just being present in this moment with what's happening. And I think cumulatively, the more that you do breath work with voice work, the quicker you check back in with it, right? And I think that for me has been something that's been cumulative, over the last 11 years professionally, 3 years training. It's kind of it's a product, I suppose, of that time that's spent actually rediscovering the joy and the love of the basics. Because the interesting thing about those kind of stresses in our lives, or environmental stresses, is that if we're gently exposed to them, I've found that it becomes less and less of a overwhelming thing that then shuts you off. And it's like the cold shower sort of techniques or the methodologies, which that is something I personally enjoy. It's not for everybody, but I quite like it because the more time you introduce that environmental stressor, the more times you realise it's actually just this thing. And I saw a brilliant thing which was about your brain creating pathways for yourself, and the more pathways that the more times you walk down the pathway in this kind of proverbial forest, the more worn the path is, and the easier it is for your brain to take that same route.
Yeah, it becomes your natural state more easily.
Exactly. And then when you're trying to try something else, so say for example breathwork or voice work for the first time, it'll be strange. And so because the path is not there, so you're kind of carving that, and just by gently doing it as often as you can, the easier that path goes. So for me now, when I'm working on something, what previously might have taken me an hour to touch base with now can take 5-10 minutes.
Amazing.
So you can be in the wings of a show, and because you've done it over and over again in different circumstances, not necessarily strictly every day. I'm always a bit cautious of kind of rigorous routines. I think I like the fluidity of going, I want to check in with this, I want to try this, I want to play with it. Tomorrow might be different. But the more you do it, the easier and quicker it becomes, I think.
Yeah.
And a bit like meditation and all that sort of work, it's, yeah.
So what would your sort of top tip or number one piece of advice be to someone, who's just graduating out of drama school, who's just coming into the industry? Mm-hmm. What would sort of your top tip be for sort of longevity within their career?
Be kind to yourself.
Yeah.
Be kind to others. Sounds really, really basic. But I think it's overlooked. A lot of that. Be gentle with yourself within that. Know, you can know what you want, know what you're working towards, but life can throw a lot of different things.
Curveballs.
A lot of curveballs. And that's great, but I think if you're able to kind of work with those things, accept the things you can change and accept the things you can't to a certain extent, I think you will find the process of being a professional actor a bit easier. It's tough. It is tough, and it's a tough industry. But there's a lot of amazing people in it, and actually the community that I've sort of been lucky enough to find and continue to find has been a tremendous source of joy, solidarity, and grounding within an industry that can be seen from the outside as being something that's very individualistic. I'm like, actually, the best work is done when
it's collaborative, together.
Exactly. When it's done in support of each other. And I think that to me is one of the things that's the most joyous about working in the creative industry. I did a job last year with a cast, and they were absolutely phenomenal. And it was an immersive show. It was Peaky Blinders, The Rise, and it was in Camden. It was great, and it was the creative team and the cast, from the sort of the directors right the way through to the front of house team and especially the cast and the stage crew were. It was like a family, and I think
that's really special when that happens.
It is it is, and I could cite all of the experiences. I've been very lucky, actually.
It's because you bring good energy to a space as well. I think that has an impact.
That's very kind. I think it's a two-way street. I think if you're able to be kind and be gentle with people, they're allowed to do that as well, and so it becomes this two-way thing where you're all going. Yeah. We're safe together. How do we work within this? How do we do the best storytelling? How do we let somebody else who maybe doesn't speak as often or isn't able to speak as often, how do they do that? That's when it becomes exciting. I become very, very, very excited when people who aren't necessarily confident in their voice or want to speak publicly, when they start to go, actually, I can talk, I can be heard.
Yeah,
that can be very emotional to watch that, I find.
Gosh, what do you think it is about sort of someone who maybe isn't a professional actor? Why is it so hard sometimes for them to find their voice? Do you think nerves is at the core of it, or is it? It's what you say, sort of being allowed to be heard and having that confidence, I guess, to speak.
Yeah, it's a fabulous question. I think nerves are definitely a block, a barrier, potentially. A fear of not being right or being wrong. Self-judgment, I think, are big factors into that thing. And again, you know, if somebody who isn't necessarily a professional speaker or performer or communicator, they aren't necessarily going to have worked those muscles as much. And so
Yeah.
it's a bit like, I don't know if this is going to be okay.
I don't feel safe.
I don't feel safe. Yeah, I don't feel safe in this. But like, then the more time and space that they're allowed to do that, the more they can go, actually, I can take ownership of this. Yeah, this is mine, and I want to be seen and heard and be present in the truth that I'm telling. And I think when I'm working with people in the capacity of kind of sort of voice and acting coaching and that kind of work, it's a privilege to be able to sit there and watch the person discover the work for themselves. Because you just go, try this. Because I'm not a guru. I'm not a, you know, there are people in the industry that are far more accomplished than I am, and there's people that are very, you know, there's sort of that have come before, and the years and years before that. But to be able to sort of question things and go, is this, what if we try that? What happens if you do that? And then they take it on board for themselves.
Amazing.
It's a real privilege to be part of that process.
Amazing.
It's very exciting.
What would you say is your proudest achievement to date?
Gosh. It's still working as a professional actor 10 years into the industry, 11 years. I think that'd probably be the most proud of.
Yeah.
Working creatively. Do you know what? It sounds so cheesy, but genuinely, the proudest achievement is to work with a community of talented, generous people.
Oh.
I think that for me is the proudest achievement. If you do go back to when I was living in North Yorkshire in a little village and kind of just starting on that process, going like, maybe this would be quite fun. I don't know if it'll work out. I don't know if it's a good idea, but I hope that people are good. The people are good and continue to be. And that is a process where I'm always learning, trying things. And so it's a privilege to be there. So I think for me, it's that privilege of being able to work in an industry like that, in a world which is sometimes, not everyone has that opportunity. So that for me is that. Yeah.
Oh, Reece, you're amazing. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. Right back at you.